watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story. Like and subscribe for more.
Hey Homeworthy, I'm Tim. Welcome to my apartment on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Come on in. My name is Tim Campbell. I'm principal of Studio Tim Campbell. We are a Los Angeles, New York-based design and architecture firm. We specialize, or have specialized for many years, in the restoration of historic structures. And that has segued into the design of a lot of new structures with a lot of historical background as reference. So we're doing quite a few Georgian houses these days and some Regencies, and of course, still a lot of contemporary homes. So we're on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. This is a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot apartment with 1 bathroom. Very small galley style kitchen, dining room, with views looking uptown and looking west. So one of the things that I love about living in Manhattan, at least part-time, is the sound of the city, which is sirens and traffic horns and people screaming and everything else that you hear from the city. But for me, one of the things that drew me to this apartment was the fact that the train going from Manhattan to Brooklyn runs right over the Williamsburg Bridge, which is outside my window. So that's one of the sounds that I hear regularly when I'm here and that you're going to hear as this video rolls along. So this is the foyer, the entrance to the apartment. It was really important to me to have an entrance to the apartment. I don't like walking into a living room or walking into an open area. So I created this little foyer here, and I really like to use foyers to show art in a salon style way. So there's a wall with works from Wolfgang Tillmans to, of course, a lot of paintings of my dogs because I'm obsessed with my dogs. And some political pieces as well, because I like to collect political art or art that is based in politics or has a commentary on politics. The way that I curate a wall like this is I just really kind of find all these different images and paintings and photographs or sculptural objects, and I don't put a lot of thought into doing this. And so the way that I installed this is I laid all the pieces out on the floor and then hired an art installer and said, I'm going to leave and you just install it the way that you think it should be done, and came back to this. And so it's meant to be very sort of casual and accidental because I'm showing, a Wolfgang Tillmans over a painting of my dog Boss next to a political poster by Robbie Connell, who's an LA artist who does these works where he's satirizes politicians and does these line drawings of politicians. And so the way that I curate this is I just want it to feel a little sloppy and a little messy. This piece here was actually the very first painting that I bought when I started collecting. This is an artist by the name of Jeff Gillette in Los Angeles. He's actually a school teacher, and he showed through a gallery in Los Angeles at the time called Dirt Gallery. And all of his work, very political. So this is a McDonald's in the slums of India, and so it's commentary basically on sort of how America moves into other countries and takes over and inserts our culture and even into the slums of India. I've collected a lot of his work. I really, really love his paintings. This painting, a really favorite painting as well, is by an artist from San Francisco called Chester Arnold, and the painting is called Bad Paintings. So it's a painting of his paintings that he thinks are so bad that he's turned them against the wall and has painted the back of them. So the Chairman Mao piece, I actually bought from my book publisher, and I think she said that she bought it. I want to say that there was some connection to Peter Marino. I have no idea what the connection was, but again, it's a political piece, and so I'm not a fan of Chairman Mao, but I did like the sort of kitsch factor of having Chairman Mao. So from the foyer, we walk into the living room. It's a room that's about 14 by 18 or 14 by 20. And I've got a really wonderful Chesterfield sofa from Sohn that I purchased. I used this as a metaphor for clients because the sofa was literally the cost of a college education. But it's a piece of furniture that I want to live with for 100 years, right? And so it's not a throwaway piece of furniture. It's a classic. It sits very comfortably. And it's meant to age and patina over time. I paired that with a Gustavian chair that I bought from Life in Los Angeles. This lamp is a mid-century lamp designed by Greta Grossman, who was a architect who worked in Los Angeles and other parts of the world. I actually restored a Greta Grossman house in LA. And then I had these two cabinets made for either side of the sofa. My background is very architectural, and so I like things to be kind of structured, and I wanted the room to feel a little cozy, so I made these cabinets with unlacquered brass to patina and age over time. And then over the sofa is a photograph by one of my favorite photographers, Karin Mueller, who's a German photographer who actually, when I built my first house in LA, she turned out to be my neighbor, and so we became friends. And this photograph is from a scene on the 101 freeway near my house in Silver Lake in LA. And Karin does these amazing urban photographs, or photographs these urban spaces sort of in a state of change. And so it's kind of a classic LA scene if you know LA at all. So the mirrored piece is by an artist out of San Francisco named Andy Diaz-Hope. And they're meant to, he does these mirrors where you're never able to see yourself in the reflection. So you're never able to focus on yourself. And so he calls them centering devices. And in round ways, they're based on the Quran and the idea that in the Quran, you're not ever supposed to show the human face, but also that you can look into the mirror, but you never really see yourself. So they're kind of a meditation on a lot of different things. And they're based on ancient mathematics as well. So the table is actually two pieces of brass cubes that I had made in LA. I just wanted these very Donald Judd sort of inspired pieces that in a lot of ways disappear because they're brass and they're reflective. And you know, I've styled it just by throwing things on it that I really like. And of course, fresh flowers, which always make a room look better. I use a lot of books because I read a lot of books, and I like living with books, and so I've got books everywhere in the apartment. The rug is a really interesting story because about 15 years ago, I was shopping for a rug for a client at Lawrence of La Brea, which is a real place. It sounds like a movie, but it's, I guess, a riff on a movie. I'd gone to Lawrence of La Brea in LA to look at rugs for a client. And I saw this rug and I fell in love with it and didn't have a place for it at the time. And when I bought this apartment, I think 10 years later, I went back to Lawrence of La Brea and said, do you have that rug that nobody wanted? And the guy said, yeah, we actually have it. It's never sold. And so I was able to buy this rug that I'd fallen in love with a lot of years before. The chair is a thrift store find. I bought that at Warts Brothers in LA and had it reupholstered in a really wonderful Holland and Sherry fabric that is based on Chanel fabrics. The lamp is sewn, again, a really wonderful piece. Sewn of Britain makes really incredible pieces. My husband and I have traveled in Africa a lot. We've gone every year once or twice since 2006, sometimes multiple times a year. And so the skulls remind me of traveling in Africa and being on safari and traveling across the Serengeti and seeing the skulls of wildebeest that have not quite finished the Great Migration. And so I like them as beautiful objects because they sort of remind me of the fragility of life and the importance of being present because eventually we all end up here, and they're really quite beautiful objects at the same time. So I like these altars or these places where you stack objects. I like them kind of sardonically, right? Because I grew up with altars in churches. But I do like creating these altars where you collect objects. And so some sacred, some not so sacred. Again, another skull, crosses, an ancient Bible that I found, I think, in a thrift store in Charleston. And then like one of my best finds that I thought I ever made was this piece of Roman glassware that I bought at a thrift store, and I think in East London. And I think I might have paid, I bought it at a swap meet in East London, and I think I might have paid like $1,200, which seemed like a really good deal for a piece of ancient Roman glassware, only to find out later that like this is the most copied non-real piece of ancient Roman glassware. So a $1,200 little mistake there. Everything else is just weird objects that I found. These pieces of religious iconography, again, little silver boxes. I think I bought this at a thrift store in Berlin, another skull, of course, and all on a really beautiful Biedermeier piece. I found this piece, I think in New York, Biedermeier is not super hot these days, but it's just such a beautiful object and made perfect use as an altar in the apartment. These pieces I bought in Mozambique. I had gone to Mozambique with a charity that I was raising money for, and there was an afternoon when I didn't have anything to do, and so I walked across the street from my hotel to a park and was sitting having a cup of coffee in the park, and a guy walks up and he's selling all of these really beautiful hand-carved ebony containers. And I bought every single one of them from the guy just because they were quite beautiful. And of course, above the piece, above the Biedermeier is a work by Glenn Ligon, who's one of my favorite artists. This is called Warm Broad Glow from, I think, the mid-'80s. Glenn's work is very political and very social and quite deep in thought. This bottle brush piece here, super heavy. The base of it is iron. And then it's a brush, and I bought this from a lady in Los Angeles who had gone through a divorce, and she set up a shop to sell all of her things that she got in the divorce that she didn't want to live with. And I believe the backstory on this is that there is a school somewhere in the States that teaches blind kids how to make art, and so the art is very tactile, and so these brushes are meant to be this tactile object made by blind kids trying to teach them about art. One of my favorite pieces. Again, I don't know why you would have a brush in the shape of a cross, but it's kind of wonderful. So from the living room, we go to the dining room, and one of the things that I changed about the apartment early on, or in the design, was this was a solid wall here, so you didn't see from the living room into the kitchen or dining room area. I hate open kitchens. I don't want to see the kitchen from a living room, and so what I did was I was able to shift the kitchen over to that side a little bit and then turn this into a dining room, because there's a view here from the window towards the Empire State Building. It's New York. I eat out all the time. I think I have breakfast at this table. I sit here and with my laptop, and so for me a dining table is best when it's piled full of objects and books, and again kind of curated in a really beautiful way. The wallpaper in the room is by a Scottish company called Timorous Beasties. I've used their paper and textiles for years. They do these really beautiful traditional looking wallpapers that upon closer inspection have all of these urban scenes and sort of craziness. So they're taking tradition and turning it on its head, which I really like a lot, obviously. The chandelier is from Workstead, who's a LA-based or New York-based design firm that does beautiful architecture and really beautiful light fixtures. The two photographs behind the dining table, it's a diptych by an artist by the name of Bill Jacobson, who's a friend of mine. And these are photographs of the California desert in both daytime and nighttime. Bill's an amazing photographer, does phenomenal work. I have a lot of his work in my collection. So my backstory is a little circuitous. I started drawing when I was about 5 years old. And I think I started drawing because I grew up in a really crazy religious household, and I really didn't want to be around holy roller people and go to church 5 times a week and do all the crazy stuff that I had to do growing up. So I created my own world where I would draw floor plans. And I don't remember, well, no, actually I do remember. I remember going to the grocery store with my mom. I must have been 5 years old. And there were, at that time in Midwest, you could buy books, plan books of houses. And they had these simple floor plans drawn and a rendering of the outside of the house. And I think my mom bought me one of those. And so I became obsessed with floor plans. I think I learned to communicate by drawing before I learned to communicate by talking. And so I just started drawing houses at a very young age and became obsessed with buildings and design. And my first job in high school was as a busboy, I think at 12. I lied about my age to get a job so that I could buy a drafting table. By the time I got to high school, I was doing freelance design for spec builders in the small town that I lived in. That's kind of how I got into it. I haven't known anything other than making houses my whole life. And if I didn't get paid for this, it's exactly what I would do. And I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't draw or think about drawing. Of course, I'm obsessed with details because it's what I do, and I'm a Virgo, so I'm like, like insane on top of that. So the beauty for me of planning and getting to do this for myself is that I get to pay attention to all the details that matter to me. I get to do that for clients as well, but there's more interaction with clients. And here it was just me making all the decisions. So because this was originally the kitchen, and because this is an old building from the late 40s, there was just a steam pipe here in the corner that was exposed in the same way it is in the bathroom, which you'll see in a minute. And so I just wrapped the steam pipe in drywall and then put a vent at the top and bottom and did them in brass, which I used a lot of brass in the apartment because I just love brass. All of the switch plate covers are brass, of course we live on the Lower East Side, so we get the train going by on the Williamsburg Bridge. That's another, for me, that's another part of the experience of living here that I really love. I love living in cities, and I like the noise and the chaos of a city, and I've got plenty of it out my window here. So the view from the apartment is looking north at the Williamsburg Bridge. There's a small park directly below us, the Williamsburg Bridge. These are some housing complexes, and then further north is a view to the Empire State Building and uptown. When I bought this apartment, I was really conscientious about the art that was going to live in the apartment. I'm a collector, and so I wanted the art collection in the apartment to reflect artists whose work I loved, and artists who worked on the Lower East Side in the 70s. And I had this fantasy that this apartment would be the apartment that Quentin Crisp would have lived in had he ever made enough money to buy an apartment on the Lower East Side. And so I really kind of took Sting's song, An Englishman in New York, and I let that sort of play in my head as I started to pick colors and materials for the apartment. But I really wanted it to feel like it had been the home of somebody really special from a long time ago. And so everything about the apartment was really kind of meant to evoke a period of time as having passed. So I didn't want anything to be too perfect, and I wanted the place to just have a very lived-in feel. So it's New York. I don't cook here much. I think I've used this stove to boil water maybe once. The whole kitchen was designed around this range. I was looking for a range that was gray with brass accents, and there's an Italian company called Ilve that makes these really beautiful ranges that are very detailed, and apparently they work really, really well, although I've never used it much. So I designed the whole kitchen around that. The second aspect of it was I designed this hardware line for S.A. Baxter. They asked me to design a hardware line for them, architectural hardware, about 8 or 10 years ago. The line is inspired by some of the mid-century houses that I've done in LA, so it's called Truesdale. And smallest thing I've ever designed, probably the hardest thing I've ever designed, to think in this scale and to get the kind of detail that I was going for. So the kitchen was kind of designed around that. Countertops are Nero Marquina marble and a hone finish, which looks amazing, not super practical for black marble, but I kind of like how kitchens age over time. Plumbing fixtures are Waterworks. I'm a big fan of Waterworks. Tile is Waterworks. I like art in the kitchen. This is a Brooklyn painter who I've recently started collecting. His name is Richard Haynes. He shows at Dan Clooney Fine Art. Richard was, I believe, a fashion illustrator for a lot of years, and in his late 60s, early 70s, decided to become a full-time artist and does these amazing drawings and paintings. And his drawings are amazing, but I love his paintings even more. And so this is a painting of Simone de Beauvoir. Another artist that I collect is a painter from LA called Frank Ryan. And this is a painting from a film still from Les Clis, when Monica Vitti is saying, "I wish I loved you more," or "I wish I didn't love you at all," which I think is such a great campy line and kind of a tragic line. But this is a painting of her from that film. Frank is a phenomenal painter and is kind of obsessed with her. I have a lot of his collection, a lot of his work in my collection as well. This side, coffee maker, of course, because I don't get enough coffee ever. Some random lamp that I bought in a junk shop on the Lower East Side. Cabinets with glass doors. And of course, you know, the service has to blend in really, really nicely. I've got more wine glasses than I've ever used. And then the refrigerator here, of course, behind. For somebody that doesn't cook, what's in the fridge? There's 4 bottles of wine, some half and half, and I've had guests here recently, so I think that they left this stuff here. I have no idea what it is. Well, I really love how peaceful the apartment lives and feels. But the apartment lives really, really well. I was really aware of designing spaces to store everything in the apartment so that everything could be put away and I could really just enjoy the beauty of the space. So I think my favorite thing about the apartment is how peaceful it feels. This is another artist whose work I collect. I met him at an art fair in Berlin. His name is Marcin Szynski, a very, very good painter. I have a thing for painters. I can't paint. I can draw really, really well, but I have this passion for really beautiful painting because I understand how hard the craft is. And so Marcin is a painter from originally from Poland. He lives here in the US now. And I bought a couple of his works at an art fair in Berlin. We became friends. And after I bought the apartment, he said, hey, I want to do a portrait of you. So let me come over and take some photos real quickly, and then we'll talk about what the portrait's going to look like later. And so he came over. I was, I think, home from work, so I'm in a t-shirt, and he took these photos, and then a year later delivered this portrait, which, you know, I think anytime, if you've ever had your portrait painted, you have all of these ideas of what it's going to be. This was the opposite of what I thought it would be, but it actually very much captures who I am when, you know, when all the drag comes off, right? You know, and he's just a phenomenal painter. I wanted a desk in the apartment because I thought initially that I would work here, but also this hallway was all reorganized so that I could get a wall of storage in here, and that was really important to me. I didn't want it to feel very claustrophobic though, so I centered this desk on this opening, which is centered on that window over there. And the desk has never really been used as a desk. I bought these really beautiful candlesticks from Blackman Cruise in LA. They weigh a ton, and they're just really beautiful. And I've just always loved them, never used them for candles. There's an ivory box here with inlay tortoiseshells, which I've randomly collected, and then fake horns that sort of make a nice little sculptural piece. So the process for me for design for my own houses is pretty quick and pretty clear. I walk in, I have a very quick sense of what I want the place to be like, and so I relaid out the floor plan in probably a few hours. I occupied the apartment though for a couple of years before I started the renovation because I really wanted to live in the space and understand how the space works and what the light was like. And part of that was financially driven because I didn't want to spend the money right away. But the other part of it that I always tell clients is that if you are going to renovate a house, if there's any way you can be in the house for 6 months or a few months, it's really good to get to know how the house works. And so I took my own medicine and I occupied the place for a couple of years. I bought IKEA furniture because I didn't want to do anything that would keep me from fulfilling my dream, which was to gut renovate this place. So from the kitchen, small hallway with a wall of storage. Built these cabinets in LA, printers, duvets, you name it, everything goes in here. And part of the fun of doing this apartment was being able to design a place for everything in the apartment. So I knew where everything would go. And then at the end of the hallway here, before we make the turn, is a piece by an LA artist by the name of Sand, who does these pieces that are, again, political. And taking the word terror, which had been sort of co-opted by the media and always represented in a really dark, heavy font and really, really aggressive, and doing it in white neon as sort of as a nod to how we can shape ideas around policy and about politics with graphic images and with font. So this wall here, when I turned 50, I had kind of a crazy party in Berlin where I invited 50 friends to Berlin, and we rented this, or I rented this former palace on the outskirts of Berlin, and had 50 friends from all over the world, had 4 nights of fun and debauchery and madness. And so I've got them all framed here on this wall just to be a memory for that time. So this is where the hallway comes to the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom. And again, more art because I can't have enough art in my life. Lighting throughout the house, I used Urban Electric, who's a really amazing lighting company from Charleston, South Carolina. The owner is a friend of mine. These are all handcrafted fixtures made in America. Urban Electric, Dave started the company because I think he worked for another lighting company who were starting to outsource all of their fabrication to offshore. And Dave grew up in Charleston, I think was trained as an attorney, and realized that there was a tremendous population of kids that were graduating high school without jobs. And so he started this lighting company called Urban Electric Company to make American-made light fixtures in Charleston, South Carolina. The quality is amazing, and they're just really good people. The bathroom was formerly smaller than this. The bathroom actually stopped right here. This was the hallway in the old iteration of the house. But something that was really important to me, and I think is important to anyone who lives in New York, is having a washer and dryer. So I was able to sneak a washer and dryer unit in the building and tuck it in here. And at the time that I did this, washers and dryers weren't allowed in the building, but they've since legalized them, so I'm no longer hiding a combination washer and dryer. The funny thing is about these units, right, they're combination units. I have them in my apartments in Portugal, and the Europeans always say it's a washer and a dryer, it does neither one of them well. It takes some getting used to learning how to use these things and make them work for you. You can't overload them, can't put too much in them, but you can actually wash a set of sheets and dry them, and it's pretty convenient. Cabinet here to store linens and odd and sundry things. Plumbing fixtures are all from Waterworks. Another super luxurious thing for me was having heated floors in the bathroom. So I did a black marble tile from Ann Sachs, but it's all heated, which is really, really nice. And then because it's a smaller bathroom, of course, I wanted it to be as open as possible. So I used a traditional shower ring, and this is outdoor fabric, like a sunbrella fabric, I think, so it doesn't mold and mildew. And then tiled all the walls, floor to ceiling. Of course, more paintings of my dogs and art in the bathroom. And then this is the old style heating that was in the kitchen, just a hot steam pipe. So left that kind of exposed because I think it shows a little bit of the history of the building and keeps the space a little humble, which I like. So we're now in the primary bedroom in the apartment. This bedroom faces north, looks out towards the bridge, which again, I like a lot, having that view. The bed I designed in LA, I wanted a platform bed and something very simple and modern and clean with built-in nightstands. This piece of furniture under the TV is a console as well that I designed. This is based on a table that I saw at that hotel in Berlin where I had my 50th birthday party. This table off in a corner. The hotel had originally been decorated, I think, by Karl Lagerfeld, and that was done in the 80s, and so it was a little decrepit and perfect at the time that I had my party. But this was a table that was shoved in a back room in the hotel that I came across these legs. I'd never seen them before and really kind of fell in love with them. This is a photograph that Peter Hujar took of David Wojnarowicz. This was a cover of the Village Voice for a story about artists who were living and dying of AIDS. And this is a photograph of David Wojnarowicz printed by Peter Hujar. So it's really kind of an epic moment, and I'm fortunate to have lived through this horrible time in my tribe's history. And for me, collecting work like this is really important because it acknowledges their existence and that these men lived and worked and created art and didn't get to stick around to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And so this kind of work for me is super important. This painting is by the same artist who did the neon piece. His name is Sand in LA. I picked these up in East Hampton, I think. I don't like a lot of clutter where I don't like a lot of clutter. I live with a fair amount of objects, and my husband would say that a lot of the stuff, the stacks of books are clutter, perhaps, but they're curated clutter. I don't like dusty things around the bed, and so I designed this bed to carry the nightstands just as these cantilevered slabs of black marble with a brass frame around them, just to kind of keep things off the floor and keep it clean and neat and not provide too much space to clutter things up. We're in the guest bedroom. I don't think I've ever had a guest in the house when I've stayed here, although I let friends come to New York and use the apartment occasionally if they're good. So we're in the guest bedroom. Another bed that I designed, very low. Here I did design nightstands set on the floor, and these were kind of designed as Japanese tansu chest in a burnt or ebonized and burnt wood finish. They're really kind of nice cabinets. They have this pull-out tray here that's covered in pony skin, which is kind of nice and luxe. But again, it's a guest room. It rarely gets used. One of my favorite photographs, course, Jackie O. This was taken by a photographer whose name is Gary Lee Boas. In the 90s, he had a book out called Starstruck. And Gary Lee Boas still works, still makes photographs, was obsessed with celebrities and porn stars. And so he would follow, pre-paparazzi days, he would follow celebrities around and he would get to know them and not take their picture until he had seen them a few times. And so they would always make eye contact with him because he hadn't been threatening. And so this is a photograph that he took of Jackie O in the probably early 70s here in New York. In both bedrooms, the TV is off to the side. I'm not a fan of TV. I watch YouTube, of course, I watch Homeworthy, I watch Netflix. When we did the apartment, my husband loves TV, and so we put TVs in both rooms. The funny thing is that this one, somehow the cable that was buried in the wall got chopped, and so it's never worked. And so the TV stayed there. It's never been on. I guess we can do AirPlay or something on it. I'm not a big fan of TVs, although I do like the new frame TVs. Those are pretty amazing, and they're less obtrusive because you can display art on the TV, so that's kind of nice. But both TVs are, yes, off to the side. I could live totally without a TV and be perfectly happy. Home means to me really just a place to come inward, and so I love living with art. I'm a collector. I love living with a collection of art. I collect objects. I love beautiful things, and so home means to me just about being surrounded by beauty.
Thanks for watching. For more Homeworthy content, be sure to like and subscribe.